Welcome, everybody, to the 3-1 All podcast. This is the inaugural episode where we will take three of the brightest minds in the club space. We will ask one question, and we can all benefit from their wisdom. And I'm honored to be joined today by Jeff Morgan, President and CEO of CMAA, by Joe Trauger, President and CEO of the National Club Association, and by Ray Cronin, the founder of Club Benchmarking. And you all worked together on what was an economic impact study report that I feel is epic for our industry. And it was great to see the three organizations come together to work on this. And I want to ask everyone, what was their number one takeaway of this economic impact study? So, Ray, I know Club Benchmarking spent a lot of time on this, as all three organizations did. If you were to summarize, what was your number one takeaway from the economic impact report?
Yep. Thank you, George, and happy to be here for the inaugural podcast. What I think of when I think about the economic impact of clubs is twofold, I think. One is obviously, and I think Jeff and Joe will get into this, there's an impact nationally, the industry as a whole across the country. But as we all know, there's clubs pretty much in every state in the country, and they're local in nature. They're beehives of local activity, the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, things like that. I think about the impact of clubs on their local neighborhoods, markets, schools. That's one point. And the second point, I think, that relates to that is we know, as anyone familiar with the industry does, that the largest single expense or investment or economic impact in clubs relates to staffing and payroll. And the beauty of clubs is the diversity of employment offerings. Every club has people who work full-time year-round, part-time year-round, full-time seasonally, part-time seasonally. Some clubs offer help for outside contractors. So every club has high school kids, college kids, and family trying to support their family. So the diversity of employment really is a powerful thing when you think of it at a local level, in that so many families come together in this place, both the members and the staff in this club. But the staff, you've got people from 18 or 16 to probably 78 working in these clubs. And I think that impact locally is significant. When we add it up, Jeff and Joe get into the national impact on jobs and payroll, but that local impact offers a lot of flexibility for people who are trying to not only make money, but make money in a way that fits whatever the need is at that point of their life. So that's what I take away from it, George.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are quite an industry. And Jeff, what is your takeaway?
Well, first of all, thanks, George. Thanks for having me on this inaugural one. As Ray said, we're honored to be here. I think for me, it's the size and scope of the industry. Economic impact studies are done by every industry, and it's all done in a standard format. So once you get the numbers, you can compare yourself to other industries. There's three components. It's direct, indirect, and induced. Direct is the number that comes directly, in our case, from the clubs. Indirect is going down into that supply chain, and then further filtering into the economy is the induced. So when we did ours, the direct impact is 32 billion from a revenue standpoint, but when you really look downstream at the direct, indirect, and induced, which is really the number everybody looks at, it's $157 billion, which by itself sounds large. However, when we start comparing that to other industries, it gives us some understanding. So in our case, the logical one to go to is golf. So golf is an industry, and when you think of private clubs, we make up about 20% of the golf clubs are private, give or take. But golf as an industry has 226 billion in direct, indirect, and induced. So our 157 billion compared to the total industry of golf is about 70% of the size. So we very much compare to the overall golf industry, which is impactful. Then let's look at employees. We have about 570,000 employees in our club ecosystem. So by that number, again, okay, what does that mean? Well, when you look at FedEx, UPS, and Marriott, we outnumber them in our club ecosystem. So we really should be very proud of our contribution, as Ray said, where Wall Street means Main Street. We really have a good story to tell because while individually, we're all around the country and maybe seen as small businesses, together we are very much a contributing part of society. And I think these numbers bear that out, and it's something we should be very proud of. And I think we are and should be.
Yeah, absolutely. It is significant. And Joe, when you think of your takeaway from this, from the National Club Association.
Yeah, well, George, it's great to be with you, and happy to be part of the inaugural, as Jeff and Ray have indicated, and really pleased to be on with both of them. And I think just building a little bit off of what Jeff and Ray had said, the overall scope of the size of the industry, I think, is something that I took away from it. When you look deep into the study, we identified 3,887 clubs that were part of the economic numbers. But there's an additional almost 2,000 clubs that were not included in those numbers. And that's because at some point, we had to make a decision about what threshold we wanted to incorporate, clubs into the actual economic numbers. And that number was $1 million of revenue. So if a club has less than $1 million in revenue, it just was too much work to get all of them into the economic numbers. So by having that threshold, we identified the 3,887 clubs. But when you look at 2,000 additional clubs with under $1 million in revenue, what that says to me is that there's actually room for growth within the industry. And, whether it's new clubs or clubs that are just growing or building their memberships, I think that those are opportunities for the industry going forward. I think one of the other takeaways I got from the study was just the stark relief that you could see in terms of the regionality of the different where the clubs are. I think intuitively we all know that we see it, but having it in sort of empirical, unassailable data, I think really paints a really clear picture. And obviously the Southeast is where everybody sort of thinks about clubs, and there is a high population of clubs in the Southeast. But seeing that juxtaposed with the other regions, I think was a big takeaway for me.
Yep. So, okay, now we have this data. We know that our industry is significant on a national scale, right? Joe, what do you do with this data from a Capitol Hill perspective to help our industry?
Sure. Well, as Jeff mentioned, a lot of industries have these economic studies, and they've had them for a long time. Whether it's oil and gas or whatever industry you want to choose. I think the significance of this work in the three organizations coming together is that this is probably the most comprehensive study that's been done on the industry, and that has significant effects for us going forward in terms of just messaging who we are on Capitol Hill, and being able to talk to a member of Congress or a senator, or even in the regulatory agencies, to talk about the impact legislation, regulations would have on an industry of our size. As Jeff mentioned, $32.6 billion in direct revenue and $157 billion in induced and direct and indirect. So being able to point those out and really drive down, and then you get into the regionality of it, and hopefully, we'll get down into the state level, and we'll be able to talk to members of Congress in their districts and say, this is the economic impact of private clubs in your district or your state or your region. That does nothing but bolster our message in terms of getting our message out there and having people listen to it and understanding why they need to listen to it.
So in summary, where would a club manager find the full report?
George, both NCAA and CMAA have that available on their website for our members. So you can go either place. It's the same report. and it's easy to find.
Yeah, for sure. Those numbers will add a lot of credibility to the voice, right?
Absolutely.
And I love the fact that the three organizations came together. We had always thought of there are these numbers out there that have been projected, but now that you all have done the heavy lifting on this, to have the empirical data that is undeniable at this point, that hopefully we can use for the betterment of all private clubs moving forward. I think this is a great foundation that you've all established. So as someone who's made a living from the club industry, I personally thank you, and certainly thank you for your time here today. The 3-1 All podcast is designed to be a short form video-based podcast where we'll cover different topics that span the club industry, with a simple goal is to try to enlighten all. So for today, I just wanted to personally thank Jeff, Joe, and Ray for your time, and I'm sure our audiences will get a lot out of this particular podcast, but specifically the work that you've done in the economic impact study. So thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, George.
Thanks for listening to 3-1 All. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you tune into your podcasts. Stay connected and in the loop by following us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Pacesetter Technology. And until next time, let's all keep pushing the boundaries of the club space together.